I said earlier that you were all pretty vague and specific, but you were the vaguest of all of the panel. And your escape route was pretty simple. You said there is no such thing as world Jewry, so there is no such thing as expectations of world Jewry. So I'm asking about you, Lana. What are your expectations? What do you find in Israel that is not to your liking or that in need of some improvement?
I mean, the cab drivers, I'd like a better seat on El Al. The truth is that nothing. I expect the two-seat solution, that's right. I expect of Israel what I expect in some ways of America in a different form, which is I expect it to run itself. I expect it to manage to be a thriving country and to make good decisions that feel like they are resonant with my values. Sometimes it will and sometimes it won't. I've also come as an adult to accept that and to realize that my relationship with this country is not based on it making good decisions every minute of every day. And frankly, speaking as somebody who spends most of her day talking with, on some level, American Jews, my bigger challenge is in trying to figure out why American Jews have the expectations that they do, some of which seem silly and infantile, and also ultimately products of ignorance. I think that's actually right. And not only ignorance, it's not just education, it's an utter lack of experience with this country. There is absolutely no true lived life experience on the part of most American Jews with Israel. And I obviously think the same thing about Israelis and American Jews. I think there's a huge gap in the Israeli understanding and experience of how Jews live outside of Israel. And more importantly than that, and more troubling for me, is an utter lack of interest. I don't necessarily see Israelis being interested in how Jews live outside of Israel. And so yes, I'm vague, because what I'm talking about is some sort of connective tissue that is maybe more emotional or spiritual or psychological. But for me, that's where the interesting questions lie.
Okay, we have about 12 minutes, I think. Questions? I can't see any of you, so there is a problem with the lighting here. Okay, I can see some of you now. Okay, question.
Shmuel, I'd like to address the 69% of those Israelis who say that they want Jews to come to
speak to the microphone.
Yeah, speak to the microphone.
You've got to turn it on.
Are you one of the 69%? You're not. Okay.
Right. Sorry. Doesn't appear to work. The question is, we want Israel to fix itself where it's broken. And where it's broken relates to the stranglehold that the chief rabbinate has over issues of religion in Israel, as it relates to conversion and for Jews who would be affected in their daily lives. So if Jews are expected to come to Israel, those from the various denominations need equal respect. And that kind of respect we want Israel to take control as it relates to that issue, and it relates to gender issues with women. So now we have a 94-seat majority. Why can't the government at this stage fix what might appear to be broken?
Thank you. I really appreciate comments, but I prefer questions, if possible. So if there are questions, over here. Is that Stephen? I think I recognized you, but I was not sure. Stephen Cohen.
We have a mutual recognition. I recognize Shmuel, and I hope you recognize me. I have a question for Abe. Abe, if 1800 or so years ago, there were a major Jewish communal leader in Rome, and he knew that Bar Kokhba was planning a revolt. He could reasonably assume that what he knew about Rome was that Rome would make sure that whatever happened, this revolt would be put down. Most likely, Jews would be expelled from their land, and 500,000 Jews would probably be killed. Under those circumstances, should the leader of the Jewish community of Rome not pick up his cell phone and call Bar Kokhba and say, look, I sympathize with your frustration, I identify with the humiliation of the Jewish people in their land, but your policy is going to bring destruction upon our country. So please, stop. I really understand Rome. So the question is, should that Roman Jewish official have picked up that cell phone? And if your answer is yes, of course he should have, then where is the boundary between hearing a Tzipti Livni say we're sitting on top of a volcano, and the situation of caring American Jews today, some of whom, by the way, happen to be also citizens of the State of Israel?
Short answers, please.
The answer is yes, one should expect, and I believe and I know that some do continuously do so. Pick up that phone, that cell phone, or whatever existed 1,800 years ago, to give that advice, to give that feeling. But that's a great difference between that same Jewish leader writing a book and saying, but if you don't do it, don't expect me to be there to support you, to defend you, and to stand for you. So my answer to you is very simple. Yes, they should do it. I'm telling you they do it. Now, you or he may not like the way they do it, but I don't think the way is to write a book to say, if you don't do it, I'm not going to support you.
I promised you this will not be a discussion about Peter's book, but I think he deserves a chance to respond.
To be clear, that wasn't what I said in my book at all. I think that the distinction that Abe made earlier is a very common distinction made by American Jewish leaders, which is to say, on questions of Israeli society, we will criticize, but on questions of Israeli security, we will not. So, for instance, the ADL, I think, spoke out very, very eloquently about issues, about the legislation that would have outlawed boycotts of Israel, about legislation that would have cracked down on made it harder for Israeli NGOs to operate, because they said these are not security issues, these are questions of Israel's internal society. The problem with that rationale is the people on the other side of that argument, the people who were pushing those legislation, adamantly believed it was for Israeli security. So in fact, in their mind, it was a security question. My point is that questions of Israeli security and questions of Israeli society cannot be so easily disentangled. The people who wanted to make boycotts illegal were saying it's because boycotts threaten our security. It's because the NGOs threaten our security because they contributed to the Goldstone Commission report. So I think you ultimately have to make, and it seems to me in reality, the real distinction tends to be, we criticize inside the green line, but we don't criticize outside the green line. And so then you have this crazy irony, right? So when the Israeli Knesset does something that infringes upon the rights of those Israeli Arabs who have citizenship, and I think that's been a great, extraordinary accomplishment of the State of Israel, to give citizenship to its Arab population when many of the Palestinian refugees didn't get citizenship in the countries to which they fled. That's part of why I'm so proud of Israel as a democracy. But it's very ironic to me to say you would criticize the diminution of the rights of those Israeli Arabs who have citizenship, but not say anything about the West Bank, in which millions of Palestinians lack any citizenship at all. And that's where I think the incoherence is.
Liam.
I just want to say to Steve that, of course, what would happen, it's an excellent example you gave, but going back to that gentleman's question, what would happen with Bar Kokhba would say, you might be right, but I have to ask Rabbi Akiva. And we'd have the same trouble all over again.
I do think, at least when I spelled out, contrary to Shmuel, I did give specifics when I think that the world Jewry, I don't like the word expect, would hope Israel, and I stated, a whole list of things. And one of them was, freedom and democracy means freedom of religion, regardless how. And yes, I think that's use the word expectation to fit the subject. Yes, I think world Jewry has a right to, if you want us to come to Aliyah, to really implement the democratic values, which is freedom of speech, which we've spoken about, and freedom of religion, which is respect for other religions and openness, etc. Yeah, so it is if you will, a precondition for Aliyah. Certainly we have a right to say, you want more Aliyah, become a little bit more open, more respectful, more tolerant. Absolutely, we have a right to ask for that.
More questions over there. Is there a microphone?
Ben Swartz from the South African Jewish community. And Shmuel, you want a question, so you're the only Israeli on the panel, so I'm going to have to pose it to you.
To me?
Yeah, because you want to. It was going to be a statement, but I'll frame it in the form of a question. I think in South
I have
Africa,
no right to have an opinion on this.
you have to have an opinion because your whole topic is around what should Israel be doing for the diaspora community. So I think it would be apt if you could maybe reflect, if not pass it on to the panel. In South Africa, I think it might or might not be well known that we sit at the coalface of the delegitimization campaigns against Israel, which are spreading around the world. It goes without a say that our foreign minister, a certain Ibrahim, deputy foreign minister, but de facto foreign minister, proudly gets up in front of his community and he states how proud he is that South Africa is more anti-Israel than most Arab states around the world. That being said, it comes to a point where the South African community, and we're only 60,000, I think we compare it to 700,000 or 800,000 in France, 5 million plus in America. We're very small, but we're very proud and we're very Zionistic. And we take these attacks on Israel very, very seriously. Yet, at the same time, we understand that with South Africa being this moral arbiter in the face of accusations of racism and all these different accusations that get bandied about around Israel, that the stakes are very high in South Africa. Because of that, we have to take it seriously. But us as the Jewish community who take this very seriously often turn around and look towards Israel to say, guys, get involved with us. Take the lead with us, partner with us, work with us. And inevitably what we get left with is what I believe is a culture that permeates into Israel still when it comes to foreign communities, even the foreign Jewish communities or diaspora communities, and that is a siege mentality. Let's hunker down, let's weather the storm, and let's not deal with it. And unfortunately, we as diaspora communities get left carrying the can, where I'm sure people have heard about the labeling issues pervasive at the moment, or dealing with the gold standard issue a little while back, or academic work. So my question to you is, how does Israel get away from the siege mentality and start trusting its diaspora communities and partner with them? It's a question that I can't ask the panel, and if you want to maybe answer it.
Well, I'll answer by using Alana's earlier answer. I think it starts with the notion that Israelis should be more interested in diaspora Jewry. If I were to have any expectations from Israeli society as someone living in the diaspora, which I don't, I would start with that, with having Israelis being more interested in what's going on in the lives of diaspora Jews, in how the difficulties, the challenges they face, among them the challenge of assisting Israel or speaking for Israel or battling those enemies of Israel who try to diminish its stature in world affairs. But I would start with that. I'm not sure if it's a great answer, but that's the one I have for you. Over there, and I think we have time for maybe 1-2 more very quick questions.
Hi, my name is Adam Scott Bellis. I'm an American Olay and a blogger for the Jerusalem Post. I gotta say, what a panel, very interesting. We're all talking about our expectations of Israel, but I have something that's been on my mind for a while. Do you think there is a difference between criticism of Israel once you have put on a uniform and experienced what every single Israeli has experienced? I joined the army, I learned a lot, my views were definitely changed from my experience of serving in the Israeli army. It's made me who I am. Do you think that, what is your opinion on that? Because I greatly think that we really don't have a right to open our mouths about this country until we've experienced what every Israeli has to experience.
Can I say something?
Okay, everybody wants to answer. Okay, Peter and then you.
I think I think, as Leon said, I actually think there's pretty wide consensus amongst American Jews about the right to criticize, but I think the way you formulate your question is very significant. Not every Israeli puts on the uniform. 20% of Israel's population inside the Green Line roughly are Israeli Arabs who don't serve, and the Haredim don't serve either. So, and I think it gets back to the point I wanted to make in response to something Alana said. I totally agree that American Jews are woefully lacking in our experience of Israel. And Birthright is partly helping in that. But a genuine experience of Israel cannot only be an experience of Israeli Jews. It also has to be an experience of the 20% of the population inside the Green Line and the 50% of the population, roughly, if you include the West Bank, who live under Israeli control, who are not Jews. That's a genuine experience of Israel. And as we foster young American Jews to have the wonderful experiences that I was lucky enough to have as a kid, beach in Tel Aviv, at the Kotel, having all kinds of interesting experiences with Israeli soldiers, as the Birthright kids do. We should also, it seems to me, in the name of honesty, also give them the opportunity to meet with those non-Jews who live in Israel as well.
I think this has distorted Jewish discussion for decades, this obsession with credentials and who is qualified to say what. In the first place, we are not just Jews or Zionists, we are also Democrats, small d. We believe in the free discussion of important issues, and we don't go around checking people's tzitzis every time somebody opens their mouth about, we were taught kabel et ha'emet mimisha omro, accept the truth from whoever utters it. And there is it is a distortion of the free exchange of ideas to begin to believe that even if what you say is right, you don't have a right to say what is right. I mean, we've got to get past this. I remember many years ago, Senator Eugene McCarthy told me this hilarious story. He was once in a debate with Pat Buchanan, about whom I think we can all agree. And Buchanan got up and said something, and Gene, who was very wicked, got up and said, Mr. Buchanan, I agree with everything you said, I just deny your right to say it. And I think the question of who's qualified and credentialed, either we believe in free discussion about matters of life and death, or we don't. And if we do, then we simply have to listen to everything that's being said and decide its truth or falsity on the merit of what it said and not on the provenance of the remark itself.
The clock is in front of me is saying that our time is up. I thank you all for your patience. I thank the panelists for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day.